Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Conspire a Theory. I have with me Karin Wilkinson, and today we will be discussing much needed subjects and interesting topics in her book. I'm sure you've heard her on other shows. I'm finally glad to finally have nailed her down for my interview. It is going to be a great show. So let's go ahead and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hello, Karin. How are you doing today?
Hi, Chris. I'm doing great. I'm just honored to be here with you. We finally made it happen and we're getting to talk today. So I'm very happy about that.
That's good. That's good. We've been trying to nail each other down for as far as time and dates wise, and we get our signals crossed. And I think at one time we were both sitting in the same room for like 5 minutes and didn't even know that we were in the same room. We were
Exactly.
kept ready to go. but
I always
we're here.
say
We're here.
when new things happen, we know it's going to be a good show. So
Yeah,
I'm
we're
excited.
here now. I would like to discuss a little bit about your book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, which is from L.A. Marzulli's press. I love L.A. Marzulli. I just love what he brings. He has that interesting take. He's got some great stories. He's surrounded himself with some very unique and well-meaning, good people, and you're one of them. And I'm so interested in your story. So, if you could, just for the listeners, please just give us a basic rundown of your experiences. And there's several topics that I would love to dig into with you. So, if you could please.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you. And yeah, L.A. Marzulli is just such a gem of a man. And myself and Vicky Joy Anderson are the two authors that he's published under Spiral of Life Publishing, and we are just honored to be a part of that great group that he's got going on there. And Yeah, I was really surprised how this book came about, but the book is about my lifelong experiences and the things that have happened to me with non-human alien entities. And I think a couple of years ago, even 5, 10 years ago, it would have been seemed almost too crazy to put out there. But now, with and this came out before all these congressional hearings and things happened. But now, with all the congressional hearings and the information coming forward and the disclosure that's happening, people are starting to realize this is real. These things are really happening, and I can't force people to believe me, and I can't make anyone believe what I'm saying, but there certainly is a lot of evidence to support what myself and many, many others have been through and what we're talking about.
Yeah, I certainly understand with disclosure currently being what it is that it's sort of a highly sensitive and politicized issue, unfortunately. And although I personally don't have any faith in like the individuals forefronting it right now, they're open to criticism, and I am one of the people critical of them. One of the things that I do feel is important is that the experiencers. I do feel like the experiencers are going through some kind of experience,
Mhm.
or something is happening to them, and whether people want to write it off simply as this is like either false memory syndrome, sleep
Mhm.
paralysis, or some type of issue. I Whether it's a psychological thing, or if spacemen really are coming from Mars to mess with us just to get their kicks. Something's going on, and I
Right.
do think we should get down to explore it somehow, and I
Right.
feel that is important.
Right. Oh, I agree with you 100% because there are too many of us who've had similar experiences that are actual physical experiences. They're not dreams. They're not delusion. They're physical things that happen to us. And so many of us have gone through the same and similar things that, for someone who hasn't experienced it to then label it as psychotic delusion or demonic delusion, it that's difficult for someone who's been through it. It's a form of almost victim shaming, and it's sad because it takes a lot of courage for people to come forward and share their stories and to share what's happened to them, especially in this environment, because it's looked upon, so poorly by so many.
Yeah,
But I'm grateful that I can
absolutely.
share it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and with people like you, we do get to share what's happened, and the reason that it's important to share is so that people understand the truth and aren't deceived by some of the lies that surround this ufology type community and some of the fallacies that are out there. I write a great deal about that, and that'll be the subject of my next book. But for now, back to this book. This book is about my experiences, which started from my earliest memories. I don't have memories of a time when I wasn't being taken against my will by non human entities. And if you want, I can kind of go through what a typical abduction was like for me when I was little, if you'd like, or we
Sure,
can
sure.
move
We'll
forward
go.
into
We'll
other
hit
things.
the highlights. I've heard many of your interviews on other shows, and I believe that my audience would have as well. But
Okay,
just
that's
for formalities, just give us the highlights, if you would,
okay.
please.
Right. Well, the highlights are, I was taken against my will from my youngest memories by entities that people, usually it would be the typical gray alien type entities that you hear described often, with the really large, huge bulbous heads and the large black screen like eyes that didn't move. They just look like a screen. They're
Hmm.
very spindly bodies, and they were just, when they were in the room, I would sense them before I'd see them. I could feel that evil in the room. And sometimes there'd be a light coming through a window, but sometimes there wouldn't. I wouldn't even notice that. They can manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that we just don't understand. It doesn't fit into our little worldview paradigm. And so a lot of what happens, people will be like, well, that doesn't make sense. How can you be levitated off a bed? How can you go through a closed window? But
Hmm.
then you look at a book by someone like Dr. David Jacobs, which I read recently, and until recently, I wasn't even able to read it or watch anything about these subjects because it was so triggering for me. But and you realize it's hundreds and thousands of people who have gone through similar things, and it's very real.
Yeah, I understand Dr. Jacobs' research. A lot of people feel that it is under some scrutiny, that he was leading towards a specific conclusion. So, of course, some
Mhm.
of the majority of the experience would probably lead that way. And then, and I think it was him and Bud Hopkins were also
Right.
one of the premier researchers on this, that were really hitting the ground running as far as talking and interviewing with the experiences firsthand about what was going on, and some truly interesting cases. Whether or not
Mm.
some people feel that they are scrutinized or not, they've run into some interesting accounts.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. Definitely. And as far as the details of it, typically I would just be so scared as a little kid when these things would happen. I'd try to find a place to hide at night. Um, and an older sibling and I were talking, and I had to have only been 5 years old. So this is how young I was. And she's saying to me, well, they can see us through the house, and who's they? We didn't have the vocabulary to even talk about who it was that was taking, I won't speak for someone else ever, but I didn't have
Hmm.
the vocabulary to speak about who was coming to take me. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know who they were. They didn't say, they wouldn't say, hey, I'm a gray or whatever. That vocabulary didn't exist for me. And it was such a horrifying experience. And some of it was interesting, and it was all unique and all, just so many different emotions at once. And I was trying to talk about it, but I didn't have, again, the vocabulary to share what was happening to me. And that's what made it, truly difficult to deal with, was not understanding fully who and what they were, and having vocabulary back in the 60s to identify aliens. We didn't have what we have today. So it was a very different time.
Were you one of the people that had like an initial reaction when Whitley Strieber's book first came out? Did you could you explain what that was like for you?
Oh, definitely. When I first saw Whitley Strieber's book, it's Communion, I think is the title of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
Make sure I wasn't mixing that up. Yeah, I saw it from across the bookstore, And I had a full on panic attack. Had to go outside, had to sit down, put my head between my knees, try to breathe, try not to faint. I had never seen someone put on a picture something that looked so similar. And it wasn't like it was an exact drawing. It didn't look exactly like they look, I remember their heads being bigger, their eyes being bigger, that kind of thing. But it, I couldn't even, I had no words. It was full on just panic and terror when I saw that. Um, I couldn't read the book. I couldn't watch the movie. I couldn't go anywhere near it. And and then I couldn't explain to anyone why, because what are you going to say? I've been taken my whole life. Well, I'd been warned not to speak from a very, very young age, that if I said anything, my family would be hurt or killed, and the people I loved. And as a little child, when you see that, and they showed me that in a screen memory, it just kind of broke something inside of me. And they found me one day at school, just sitting in the corner of a bathroom stall, holding my knees and rocking back and forth. They couldn't get me out of the stall. They called my mom, and she came to get me, and she talked me out of the bathroom. And I remember just saying, I don't want them to take me. I don't want them to touch me. Who? The little guys, the little ones, I knew what I was talking about, but how do you tell somebody, it's like describing
Yeah. What?
something
How
that
old
there's
were
no
you
name for.
at this incident?
I had to have been 5 or 6. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
6 maybe. And, I think that's the point where I really learned to dissociate, because, she took me to the doctor to make sure I was okay. And he said, whatever's happened to her, she's young, she'll forget, she'll be fine. This is the 60s and 70s, it was a different time. And I couldn't tell them specifically who or what was happening to me. So at that point, I realized I was kind of on my own. And little kids, when they're groomed or trafficked in any way, often are threatened with their families being harmed, or the people they love.
Mm.
And that's exactly what happened to me. And so I wasn't going to risk being responsible for the people in my life being harmed. And I
All right.
think that's the point
At
where I
this
really kind of
time,
dissociated.
you were you conscious of your handler at this time?
I wouldn't say I was terribly conscious of him. He was always that same kind of man he appeared as a man that was there. Um, but didn't have as much communication with him at that point in my life. Um, it wasn't until much later, or later on in my, about 8, 9, 10, when I started to realize it's always the same guy, or it looks like the same guy who's always with me, who's, guiding me around, making me feel safe, making me feel more comforted. Not that I could feel safe or comfortable. So, he was always there, but I didn't realize the significance of him at that point. No.
Okay. All right. We'll dissect that character later on. So I guess, and the primary experiences that you've had that stuck out when I would listen to you were several, I guess, my lab like experiences where you would be taken under a base or something
Hmm.
like that. You'd be put in like what you called a sideways elevator that sounded more like a sophisticated tram track type of
Exactly.
device or vehicle,
Hmm.
which is
Yes.
probably as best you could understand at the young age that you were at. That's how you could best explain it, as a elevator that went sideways, and
Right. Right. Yeah, we
it
went
was
into the
probably
elevators that went down, and then it seemed like an elevator to me because it was so quiet. And in that point in time, I mean, every vehicle I was familiar with made noise. So for it
yeah,
to be that quiet, the only thing I could associate that with would be another elevator.
yeah, and it was probably some type of specialized track vehicle, like a monorail or something of that nature. Right? The
Exactly. Exactly.
and also and I think another several experience you've had like a lot of experiences, and it's a lot to cover, and I'm really glad that I've taken the time to pour over your book, because you could tell it's written by you type of thing. Your voice is very unique and prominent throughout the book. So And that's one of the
Yes.
things that I enjoyed coming through, is that your personality shines through in it.
Oh, thank you.
There were some things here and there that, just clinical stuff, and in some instances, yeah, that it's hard to put any personality into the clinical details of stuff that like a lot of people have. But with with your writing and stuff like that, it felt like an honest portrayal from you. It was definitely felt like a real conversation, and I really have to commend you for that. For
Oh, well, thank
for
you so much. Thank you
the
so much. Yeah, and there are parts of it that were very, very difficult to write, and parts of it I probably disassociated a bit, even in my writing. And you can probably see that where I kind of am a little less emotional than you would think I should be, because to reach back into those really ugly events just triggers so much of an emotional response. And I didn't share everything that happened because I didn't see the benefit of that. Because to share these horrific moments and horrific things that happened is kind of like, looking at an accident happening in real time. And I didn't think that that was going to actually provide any usefulness to anyone with, going too far into too many of those things. Providing a
yeah,
few examples I thought would be more than enough, because I didn't want it to be traumatic. I also have some very positive things in the book as well, because I didn't want the book to be just all scary and traumatic and difficult to read. I wanted to
yeah,
share the truth about everything that happened along the way.
yeah. That's understandable. Wholesome paranormal experiences are very rare.
Yes.
Um, I just to plug for a minute. I'm working on a book right now, a comic book, where I take wholesome experiences and then I illustrate them. The When I was talking to my editor, she had pointed out that, the wholesome experiences stuff are just, you just don't hear them all that often. And because of that, I
Yes.
think this project is going to be very unique. But back to yourself, you also it's very apparent that you have a biblical frame to
Mhm.
approach these subjects from, which is often frowned upon in the I believe in the experiencer stuff. I think not until recently, it's sort of people have been more braver about admitting that, since it's often a common trope now that if you want the aliens to go away, in most cases you just declare the name of Jesus Christ, and then the aliens 9 times out of 10 will shuffle off. Um,
Mhm.
you
Yes.
even
Excuse me. Sorry, I
you
sneezed.
even
Oh yeah, I believe that, and I wrote recently. I write monthly for L.A. Marzulli's newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, and I think it was 2, maybe 3 months ago. The article I wrote was on, you know, does calling on Jesus' name help someone every time they're in a situation like that? And there are instances where it does not, or I've heard that it does not. And I wrote, some of the reasons why I believe that. And there are some, and I won't get into that here, but that certainly is available. If anyone wants to find out more, you can contact me and I can share more of that information. But for the most part, yes, it does work.
yeah,
There has to be a belief in your heart. And you can think it, you can say it, you can pray it in your head, you can say it out loud. He hears you when you call. And the thing that I know from my personal experience is they have the same creator that I do. And when I realized that and confronted them with that, that was where my freedom came from, was that once they realized I knew who and what they were and I knew how to get away from them, they realized they couldn't take me anymore. And that's all that's the proof for me right there. And for many others who've been able to stop unwanted abductions as well.
yeah.
But it is
You
written,
also
yes, the
throw
book from a biblical lens.
You also throw in some what you feel is relevant biblical history, such as the story of Noah, which I find interesting. Referring to Noah as like the eighth man, which I had to put a little note in there because I thought it was is interesting because in cartoons there's this cartoon called the eighth man, the eight man, And
Oh,
it's a, like
really?
this cute little cartoon, and um, so that just popped into my. It's
Oh.
just pop culture stuff, but with
Mhm.
that, it's also it shows us that there's a lot of what I believe is pop culture bleed over that I feel
Mhm.
influences the experience as well. Like I explain it as, our pop culture sort of becomes the whatever the other side is, their wardrobe department. Is that a lot of them will often, and I feel that Whitley Strieber, that his cover, because it was so iconic, I felt that it did heavily influence the culture of
Mhm.
where most people were seeing grays simply because they expected that's what they're supposed to see. And maybe
Right.
the entities themselves, they went to that default for some reason, that, it's like, well, this is what it is, so this is what we'll do, type of thing. um,
I think
because
that's
but of
possible in
course,
some circumstances, but
yeah, in yours maybe not, because you were
right.
experiencing the typical stuff before you were influenced by that cover.
Oh,
And
definitely.
so
And for many
so
others. But then once it creates a picture of what people could expect, then it it changes the paradigm for some people. But for those of us who experienced it, and not just myself, but many others, the first sighting of that book cover was terrifying and shocking and difficult, to say the
yeah,
least,
yeah,
and was something that we were familiar with and didn't think anyone else was, because we've been trained not to talk about it, trained by society, trained by our captors, trained by just in general. Well, this is one of those taboo subjects. You don't walk around saying I've been abducted by aliens, because people will put you in an institution, or people will say, oh, there's that crazy woman again, and
yeah.
nobody wants that.
It's time to medicate. Yeah, it's time to
Mhm.
medicate.
Exactly, exactly.
And I've heard instances where some people will stop taking their medications because then the aliens stop visiting them, or they'll
Mm,
go to such lengths as tying themselves up when they go to sleep, because the aliens don't have the dexterity to untie them and take them. But of course, some people,
yeah,
they just can't live like that. So I guess
yeah.
having a means to deal with it somehow is beneficial. Um,
Right, right. Yeah, I've never heard of that. In my experience, these entities can manipulate space, time, energy, and matter, like I said, in ways that we don't understand. So the only tie that would protect someone would be their tie to their belief system in our creator. And, for me, that's the only protection that has ever worked for me. But as far as, there were no ropes or anything that could have stopped them, and they could control me in ways that were so unusual and hard for us to understand, because of things like what we call UFO brain fog, where it's just like thinking and walking through molasses almost, where you just can't. I couldn't get the words out. I couldn't get the movements out that I wanted to do. The thoughts
mhm.
were there and the will was there, but the body and the mind just would not cooperate. And that was just a means of control, and almost, invisible chains, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. Let's go ahead and talk about these some of these characters that you've run into, like the Greys and your handler in particular.
Mm-hmm.
In various chapters, you refer to your handler as a unique variant of a reptilian species with
Mm-hmm.
cloaking, I guess. I don't want to say shape shifting in particular, but definitely a sort of influence of a way to screen his appearance.
Right.
Could you discuss that a bit?
Right. I think the word for it is, if I might be wrong, is meniscus modici. I think, but it's just the ability to, yeah, adjust your appearance, change your appearance. We do things like that right now with holographic imagery, with VR imagery, virtual reality, things like that. And it. So for him to change the way he looked, his appearance, so that I wouldn't be as frightened. It was just another form of manipulation so that I would be more comfortable with him. And it's interesting after I wrote that the number of people who've reached out to me with similar
Mhm.
experiences, having had a handler of sorts, one individual that seemed to always be with them at every instance of being taken. Um, so what I thought was a very unique situation was not at all, just something that happens. But yeah, he appeared as human. He looked very large, very tall, very muscular, very almost military,
Mhm.
typical military type looking human when he was with me most of the time. But then I would see him kind of phase in and out. And I realized he was masking his true appearance. And I wanted to see what he looked
Mhm.
like. Because at this point, I had created this Stockholm syndrome type relationship with him where I, it's capture bonding. It's where
Mhm.
you feel your captor has provided you with a sense of survival and safety and security that's not really what that, but because of the situation, that's how it's perceived. And so I had a affection towards him, an unhealthy affection towards him, and I wanted to know what he looked like. Um, and I wasn't afraid, having already seen, and you have to remember at this point, I had already seen so many different types of non-human entities. Everything from the insectolins and the greys to the Nordics and the reptilian types, and they all look different. When I was taken, not one of them was cookie cutter except for the little grays that would come to get me, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on those, which I write about. But they they all were different, like humans are different. So I wanted to see what he looked like, and he was reptilian, and he was, in his own way, in that way, very beautiful, for lack of a better word to put it. And his they were almost like scales, but they were like shimmery, shiny, opalescent, beautiful, almost bejeweled. It was just, you know, I wanted to be comfortable with him because I was so used to being around him, and I wanted to be comfortable with what he looked like in his natural form. So,
Mhm.
but I did write a bit about him and his role and everything in the book.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have heard various types that people have run into that is very similar to that, a sort of
Hmm.
a reptilian type. I've I've been doing some illustrative work for a compendium from R. Keith
Yeah.
Andrews. He's releasing, and I've drawn so many reptiles. I can tell you,
Oh
there's
my.
so many different types of reptilian
Yeah.
archetypes out there, and I've drawn like, I think, maybe like little over a dozen, and
Well, I'd
they're
love to
all
see
very
them
unique. it
when I see you in person next week. Bring them with you. I want to see
yeah
what you've drawn and see if any of them look similar because I've yet to see any that you know look close enough.
from what I've
And
heard, I don't think I've illustrated something close to your variant, but I think I
okay,
have seen familiar in the literature out there, and when I think of it, I'll bring it to your attention. But
absolutely.
the entities, because I think another person out there, he had encountered a similar one, but his was female, and it was
Mm,
had to deal with more, I guess, time travel aspects. And when I think of who that is, I'll bring it to your attention.
okay.
the The other thing is that you also had like many experiences with these gray types, and when I had
Hmm.
me and Shane Jones of Open Minds Media, when we had discussed this stuff, we were going back and forth, and we were discussing, like, if we were to account these cow mutilations, which is a
Hmm.
popular thing that is brought up in the
Oh yeah.
lore. It's like it's like a lot of soft tissue, and we were speculating
Hmm.
that maybe they use these um, wounds for a process that you had described in your book as ectogenesis of transferring
Yes.
entities from, I guess, from their first few trimesters, which would be used, which female participants would be used, and then the fetus would then be transferred into, we speculate, either an external womb, so that way it could grow further, develop further without, I guess, revealing the secret to the rest of the civilized world.
Yeah.
And, or now looking back, maybe these soft tissues were used as, possibly, I speculate, filament, like on how we 3D print, we 3D print little trophies and stuff, like little fun items.
Hmm.
Maybe in a similar sense, these grays are 3D printed, using the cow soft tissues and minerals and stuff as a form of filament, because you had described them, as, some of them, and this is very common, as smelling foul, and that their
Right, right.
systems are very simplified, the grays, and that they excrete their waste through their skin, which, probably doesn't help the smell. And is that they're genderless, automatons, as one would describe them,
Some of
probably
them,
powered by,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I described some of the grays that way. Some of them, I believe, are like an avatar, like a meat suit. I mean, we can create skin in a lab, right? And that's what I believe they have done with these grays. They've created these avatars that look similar to a species of non-human alien entities that I have encountered. But these littler grays, the ones that are like avatars, they're like cookie cutter. They all kind of look the same, and their eyes don't move. And like I said, some of them don't smell very good, right? But then when I was taken, there were other grays that didn't look like that. Their eyes moved. Some were taller, some were shorter, some looked more masculine, some looked more feminine. They were all different, the way people are all different. And so, what I surmised from that, and their mouths would open and their faces had expression and things like that. And but the shorter grays, the ones that looked the same, they weren't like that at all. And so what I surmised from my personal experience is that these little grays were like an avatar, like a meat suit created to house another entity, whether it be AI, whether it be demonic entity, whether it be another entity altogether.
Yeah,
And it could be
some
any
suspect
number of things.
methyl,
And
yeah.
yeah, and it could easily be that they're using, yeah, like you said, the cattle, or they could be using anything. Because for us to create, to take cells and replicate those in a lab, if we can do it, they can do it 1,000 times better because they are so much more advanced than we are. Um,
Mhm.
I do believe the bovine blood. L.A. Marzulli talks about this as well, and he and I both have agreed on this and talked about it for the last couple years. That bovine blood can be used in place of human blood, the same way we use bovine milk in place of human breast milk for our babies. And that is another reason why I think cattle mutilations happen. I mean, out here in Texas, where I am, certainly, and you are, there certainly are a lot of cattle mutilations in the West, and these animals are drained of blood. There's no blood pool in the ground. Certain organs are taken. And LA does have a movie on that. I think it's the number 5 in his series, 5 or 6, and I am in that one as well. Just because it is relevant to this breeding program, because the human body is designed to reject an embryo at about the 3-month mark if there's something wrong with it, if it's not going to be able to be brought to fruition, if it's not, if it's not going to be a
Yeah,
live birth,
viable, yeah.
something's viable birth. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. And that's about the point where they always would take mine. And at that point, I had the experience where I was taken and down this strange hallway I'd never been down before, and it was lined with what looked like aquariums. And these were tanks, and in these tanks, and it looked red, but that could have been the lighting, because everything when I was taken into these underground facilities was very darkly lit, almost a red, blue, or purplish color in some places. And the lighting all seemed very indirect. I could never see where the light was coming from. But this
Mhm.
particular hallway was very almost a red color. So I don't know if the tanks were red or if it was the lighting. I'm not sure which. But in these tanks were different types of embryos. I don't know what they were. I tried very hard to concentrate on them, but again, UFO brain fog gets in the way. Excuse me. But, there were embryos in these tanks. And at that point, they took me to the end of that hallway where the tanks ended and the hallway continued on. And there was a door on either side. And they opened the door to the right and had me go into that room. And it was the size of a large closet. And there was a human in there, a woman, and she was on the ground imitating childbirth.
Yeah,
And
I read this sector,
yeah,
and it's chills down my spine. So I'm not pile driving you just to try to stop you, but it's like, oh, I know where you're going.
okay,
This is intense, folks. Yeah, I preface, just sensitive materials.
absolutely.
Continue, please.
Yeah, and I'll be cautious with it. I definitely don't want to share anything that's too sensitive for the listeners or the audience. But
Mhm.
I was handed a baby, and I was told it was my baby to hold this baby. It was a good baby, and I take this little baby, and it's very dark in color, almost a purplish blue, reddish color, and it's very solid, like and small, like brick. It didn't move really. I held it up to me, and it wouldn't cuddle into me. It wouldn't respond to me, and I was, but I knew it was mine. Just from looking at it, even though it didn't look fully human, I knew it was mine. Just that mother's instinct kicked in, and I'm like, well, I'm going to fix this baby, and I'm like, what's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with my baby? Because it wouldn't respond to me. And they just kept saying, it's a good baby. Hold your baby. It's a good baby.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm getting more and more
Obviously,
upset.
trying to trigger the maternal instinct. Yeah.
Yes. And I think they were trying to get it, maybe it wasn't healthy, maybe it wasn't thriving. So they're trying to get me to help it to thrive in some way. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm just going to take this baby home and I'm going to fix it.
Mm.
And so they're like, no, you have to go now. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I'm taking my baby with me. And at that point, I was just shut off. Like they can shut you down
Yeah,
like you're asleep in an instant. And then I woke up at home in my bed and I remember just crying and crying and crying because I could still feel that baby in my arms. I could still kind of smell it on me. I could still feel where I had held it up to me, even though it didn't respond to me, even though I didn't feel anything from it. I felt something. And that was just so, so difficult, and it set up a lifetime of me wanting to see them again,
yeah.
see it or
Do you
others again.
feel that? Do you feel that this was one of the three entities that you later experienced visiting you in your bedroom? Because I remember you had discussing
I
that. Do you
don't
feel that?
know. Yeah, I have no way of knowing if it was this, if it was one, if that ended up being one of the three that visited me later. I know that the three that I write about that visited me much later in life, they would have had to have been, 20s, 30s, um, were my children because I could tell immediately when I looked at them. And the first thing I thought when I woke up and they're standing there is, oh, these are my boys, right? And I said one of my kids' names
Mhm.
out loud, and I'm, asked him what was wrong. And as I'm focusing and my contacts are dry because, I had slight sleep in him, and I realized, oh, these aren't, no, that's not him. He's too short. And all three of them aren't here right now. All the different logic things that suddenly go through my mind,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
focusing. And I try to wake my husband up, and he's just out cold and just a
Yeah.
dead sleep where I can't even rouse him. But I knew they were mine. I could tell by looking at them. There was just no question in my mind and in my heart. I just felt this love for them, but I got none of that back. There was
Yeah.
their eyes just so dark and just I felt such anger and hate and just it's so hard to describe this awful negative feeling that came off of them, but it was palpable. It was just
Mm.
palpable, and it was and it that really really broke my heart because I really wanted there to be more to them. I've been asked, if they were hybrids, is there salvation for hybrids? I'm like, I can't answer that. That's the question
Yeah.
only God can answer. That's not for me to answer. But I did not feel any love or any humanity from them. And, this is something that I know from the things that I've read in the ancient texts and scrolls, not just the Christian Bible, that this is an abomination. This is not something that's supposed to happen. You don't mix species. We don't even mix, there some things, yeah, you can hybridize a tomato. Okay, that's different. But not species. It's just
Yeah.
not.
Well, I mean, in the myths and legends, there are what we would now assume are chimeras, such as the Minotaur,
Yes.
the
Yes.
sirens,
Exactly. Yes.
mermaids, and stuff like this. Could this be the result of Nephilimic influence or something of that
Oh,
nature?
definitely.
And we just always
And I
wrote
think
it
we
off
see
as
that.
mythics and stuff like that. Who knows?
No,
Who
and
knows?
I
That's
think we
just
see that in the ancient texts, and that's why I
Mhm.
bring up Noah in the book, because I believe the flood of Noah was, that was God's cleansing the earth, not of humans and people that he loved, but of it said the whole of the earth was corrupt, that the species were mixed, that the animals and the humans, everything was no longer pure, was no longer what it was intended to be, what he put out here. And it was dangerous. So there would be no
Mhm.
humanity left. There would be no salvation left. There would be no birthright for the earth to us, that was given to us after they the fall, and this planet was kind of taken away from them. They lost it. And that's kind of been the big battle ever since, trying to get it back. That seed war of Genesis 3:15, that's the whole crux of the Bible. And if you don't get that, you kind of lose sight of the whole rest of it. I mean, yes, it's a salvific issue. The whole Bible is about our salvation in Jesus, but it's, the seed war that's what it's about. That's Jesus, the
Mhm.
war to try to keep him from being born. And it's going on today, just in a different form.
Yeah. What is your impression on the, I guess, the transhumanist movement so far? What is
Mm,
I feel you've written a bit about that, and relating to the alien influence that has had on
mhm.
transhumanism, and then you see us doing our own transhumanism. In a way, it seems like we're
Right.
oddly trying to meet each other on some sort of level ground. But what is your impression?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really dovetails right into what we were just talking about, because the transhumanist movement is just an extension of, again, at what point are you no longer human? At what point has a human been changed to no longer be fully human? And then is that a salvation issue? I mean, when you talk about super soldiers and things like that, at what point, when we're augmenting the human body, um, so that we are, impenetrable to disease and death and all the other things that take us out of the game, at what point is that taking us past the point of being human and more to the point of being some sort of AI robot? And there is a verse in the Bible that says, they will long for death and death will flee from them.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what it's talking about, getting people to the point that they're no longer, you can't even die and you're begging for death, but it's not going to happen because you can't be killed, and then at that point, well, are you even human anymore? So there's a ton of different directions you can go with that. A lot of theological and philosophical discussions can be had around that point. We could write a plethora of books on that one subject alone.
Yeah, yeah,
We could talk for hours and probably not get through it all. But that's my
yeah,
theory. My thoughts on it are that, it's a continuation of this seed war,
yeah.
and not in
Okay.
us trying to meet them in the middle, but us trying to have this, longevity, this ability to live forever, this more immortality that we're not intended to have in that way.
Yeah,
We are intended, I believe, to go on, but not here in this body on this earth. I believe that there's something much more wonderful for us. And having had a near death experience, from my personal experience, I feel like I really got to see and feel what some of that was, and it was amazing.
yeah, yeah. So you're not afraid of death. Yeah, it's
Oh, not at all. No, no, no.
all right. Yeah.
Not at all.
As I guess the old saying goes, death comes for us all, so don't rush it, type of thing.
You're right.
The With the transhumanism thing, my impression is that we've been sold a bill of goods with transhumanism through our popular fiction, like cyberpunk and science fiction has sold us that with transhumanism comes superpowers and being able to see through walls and being able to leap tall buildings in a single bound and all this action hero schlock. And when we see it implemented in our natural world, it's more, it does in some instance have a good good in good positive application with people with nerve damage who are able to, then have their nerve endings, I guess, repaired or trans, trans augmented, so that way they can, like, not
Right.
shake, with some neurological diseases, not shake proficiently, or
Right.
finally be able to walk upright using their legs, which, serve some type of
Right.
either nerve damage or disease and stuff like this. And I feel that through that, some people then see that, and they with some people it might be a necessary thing to, normalize them, so to speak.
Right.
But with
And I don't
others,
see anything wrong with that if you're
yeah.
doing something that's going to help you to live a more full life, to give you quality of life. I've
Hmm.
certainly had my share of surgeries and rods and wires and plates and screws put into my back here. And if I hadn't had those things, I wouldn't be here today. But
Hmm.
it didn't change me as a human. It didn't change my, you know, who I am biologically. It added a structure that where I needed something to be replaced. You get a flat tire, you put a new one on. But so I think that it's wonderful that we have these opportunities to help people who have serious disabilities and needs. So I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's, again, something everyone has to make a choice for themselves, what they feel is right and what they don't. But then you look at like a Superman kind of thing, and Superman is special because he's the only one. But then what happens when everyone's Superman? Superman's not special anymore. Just because he can leap a tall building, well, so can I, so can you, so can everyone else. And then it doesn't become anything except the norm. So again, it runs the risk of becoming mainstream, and then it's no longer special, it's no longer unique, it's no longer important. And so there are some abilities that could be misconstrued as
Yeah,
being a
yeah,
good
yeah.
thing.
The goalposts are moved, so to speak.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
then it's like the dial is put up to 11 for some people, and for some people, what would be, a baseline, what then they can then abuse and turn into exceptionalism. The what I think is, though, is that, some people, we sort of, I guess, there's sort of like, worship of, how do I put this, worship of augmentation. We see it we see it visualized in celebrities and stuff who become addicted to plastic surgery. And it's this whole idea of, I could just go under the knife and be better, you know, whether
Right,
it's through
right.
vanity or, and I feel that a lot of the, not to get too political here, but a lot of the pronoun movement, the political stuff that everyone, the is now, is a lot of some of these individuals, I don't feel that they're genuinely expressing, radicalized gender identity stuff. It's more, some of it sounds like a sick obsession with uh, worship of pharmaceutical ec- uh, augmentation and stuff
Mm,
like this. It sounds like a fetishization of the medical process, and because so many people, it's like it, like we're celebrating, in a sense, mental illness in a way, and some people are enabled by the medical establishment or whatever, because, I mean, they get their guinea pigs, and everyone gets to line up because they feel like they're on the front line of some political or social war of some sort. And I
mm,
I feel that that is sort of, wires are getting crossed, that people are being taken advantage of rather than helped. But if
right.
you present to them an argument, they don't want to be wrong. And social media, of course, has been weaponized to embolden such positions rather than level the playing field and have an honest conversation, unfortunately. So I hope I'm not dragging you along to the political
No,
court.
no, it's interesting. I get what you're saying too, that there's this line that gets lost between what is a need and what is just a psychological want. And we kind of, it's hard to tell, and no one's taking the time to really examine, is this what someone really needs, or is this just what someone really wants? And
Mhm.
how necessary is one thing versus another. And I think to each person should have the right to their individuality. I mean, if you want to identify as a dolphin, go ahead, but I know, what my belief systems are, and I'm allowed to have those for me, and that's great. And that's so, but what's necessary for one person, those definitions are just so vastly different from person to person.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't expect anyone to believe the way I do, but I also don't want anyone else to expect me to buy into their belief systems either.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I am going to
It's
share
that.
what I believe in when I think it's important, and I want the opportunity to share that, and I want everyone to have their opportunities to share as well. So and you find that often you don't get those opportunities because other
Mhm.
people are so passionate about what they believe that they don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, it's that sort of required participation in my position. Is mandatory, but once you expect the same, then all of a sudden the line is drawn, type of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it isn't fair, but we're not the ones in control of that, and that's why I'm glad people like L.A. Marzulli are sort of like he has to do everything himself, in a way, and encourage that sort of I guess rebellious individuality, which is not in vogue anymore,
No, it's not.
which used to be
No.
admired, before, and but now is seen as no matter what, just going up against the status quo is now it's like no, you need to be othered and eventually destroyed, for that. You need to be challenged, and he seems to be doing a good job holding his own in
He is.
those.
He is, and I have a great deal of respect for him. I mean, to publish my book alone took a great leap of faith on his part, and but he believed in, and my dedication is to him because he listened and he believed, and he is always there, as a
Mhm.
friend and as a colleague and as a mentor, and all those things, and those are important, and those are qualities that are hard to find, and people like you, people like LA, that are willing to step out and share their thoughts and their beliefs and what's happened to them, or and allow others to do the same. They're few and far between. I'm too Christian for most podcasts, or too woo for most shows, or too this or to that, and it's just like, can't we I would just like to share some information, and I'm not
All
going to
right.
force anyone to walk down my path of belief by any means, but I do feel strongly about my belief systems, and I will defend them for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
guess we'll go ahead and wrap up on the last topic and discuss the implementation and development of AI as we
Mhm.
understand it. You have some positions on that as well. I would love to hear them, and then we could discuss them a bit as we come to a close.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think AI is something that everyone needs to take some time to really look at and understand a little better, because the opportunities with AI are so amazing and so useful and so helpful, but it is only as dangerous as we allow it to be. It's only going to
Mhm.
have as much information as we give it. But if we allow it to have this unending stream of information, and if we say you're going to go in this direction or you're going to go in that direction, then we run the risk of never allowing any other opinions or things like that. And the dangers that come with it are, you can't tell AI from reality. You can't tell if you're talking to a person or an AI rendition of that person. I mean, clearly we are really talking to each other. We know that, because we've had our, normal human hiccups. But I'm sneezing and we're doing the normal things, but you can't, you run that risk of not losing your personal identity, because you have no idea when an AI identity could just take over. And it fits into so many of the prophecies and predictions and the things that are out there, and I'm trying to spread it beyond just the Hebrew Bible. But in the Bible, it just fits so neatly into so much of what was written, and it helps make sense of a lot of things when you're like, well, how could that happen? Oh, AI could do that. So it really kind of opens a can of metaphorical worms, and it's a much longer conversation than I can have in 10 minutes. But what I will say is, I just believe it should be approached with caution
Oh
and with a
yeah,
full understanding of the capabilities. And there just haven't been enough restraints put in place to make sure that we're handling it safely and effectively and efficiently. And I think that's very unfortunate.
yeah. I from as an artist myself, there's AI has sort of become a battleground for digital artists and traditional art people. That one of the contentions that from our position that we have with AI is that in order for it to grow, it has to appropriate our efforts and techniques and styles and skills.
Yes, yes,
And in
yes,
doing,
exactly.
but this was done without our consent. At first, it was done, under the guise of educational purposes, but then it was then quickly commercialized. And once it became commercialized, it became competition for all of us. And of course, it's competition that because we're not machines, we cannot keep up with because the drawbacks with humans is that, we take a long time to do everything. AI can do in 6 seconds what takes me 6 hours.
But
Um,
you will come up with something unique that no one has thought of before, where the AI can only work off of your original ideas. And that's what makes your artistry so much better, Chris. And yeah, as soon as you come up with that unique thing, AI is going to be able to come along and do the same, or similar thing. But I do think that, you definitely spelled it out really well there with that, because you're the one who comes up with the ideas. It just takes them.
yeah, yeah. And although I mean, I do like there is some aspects to AI that is like just it's cool that it can do these things, But of course, to get there, it had to do it. I guess what some people think is unethically, and but the thing is that artists naturally learn by mimicking and in some cases copying other styles and stuff like this. And in a sense, AI is doing that, but it's sort of taking a shortcut. And because of that, I don't think the mainstream or most of the artists who are critical of it, they don't it hasn't earned the respect, because it hasn't quote unquote paid its dues, so to speak,
Mm,
as far as learning going through the hardships that artists had to suffer
right,
to get to that. And also there's
right.
this commercial and in being commercial, it's also become highly politicized where it's been given a lot of constraints and a lot of I guess politically based um, blocks that where now even if it could grow, it probably can't because there are some topics and stuff that it would consider taboo that it cannot you know that it can't do. Like say for instance, there was this one where people were making fun of it because it was an AI model where you could ask it to do anything, but it would never, recreate white people. It like made everyone a person of color, and then you would ask it, make the create me an image of the founding fathers, and it turns, was it George Washington black? And
Right.
it was
But
it was
that's all
funny.
because of what was given to
Yeah,
it, what it was fed
yeah,
with to start,
exactly.
right? So it doesn't have an original thought of its own. It can surmise what the next logical thought might be, and it can come up with ideas, but those are all based on information it already has.
Mhm.
So if it was told
Yeah,
only to draw yellow people, then it may only ever draw yellow people or purple people or whatever, and that's
and
what
I
we're
sort
left
of
with. So,
and I sort of feel like it's that sort of political, I guess, handcuffs that are placed upon it that the real artists don't have to adhere to. So I sort of feel in that sense we're kind of safe, but it kind of sucks that only by, I don't want to be defined by, my degeneracy, sort of in a sense where that's the only means that I can then be exceptional. But it is an interesting and much longer conversation. It could probably happen,
Yes.
another time. But we
Yeah,
have
definitely.
to,
I could, yes. Oh, yeah, I could talk about all of that for hours. I mean, it sounds like we could
absolutely,
have so many fun, amazing conversations together. I know we didn't even barely scratch the surface on the things we kind
yeah.
of thought about talking about today. So we'll definitely, I'm game for a part two if you are. It sounds wonderful. So we'll do it.
Yeah,
We'll schedule it
this was a
or get.
fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining me, and we'll conclude here. Do you have any parting words or advice for the listeners before we wrap up?
Sure. Thank you so much again, Chris. I've had a great time. It's been a wonderful conversation. My what I would just say is, if you've had an experience, or someone who's had an experience, I know it's hard because society still doesn't look upon it as something that's acceptable. It's okay. There are people you can reach out to, and there are groups you can join and things you can do, and books you can read. And I know, you've probably heard all that before, but you can reach out to me through my website. You can send me an email. It comes to me, not someone else. I do all my own email, and I will get back to you. If you tried to reach out and you haven't heard back, it means something happened to the email, which Chris and I know can happen very easily. Emails disappear all the time, but reach out to me. I'm happy to just be someone who will listen to your story and believe you. It doesn't matter who believes you or not. It's what you know and what you believe in here, and that's the most important thing with it all. And just find the truth. The truth is important, and the truth will set you free. And thanks again, Chris. I just appreciate you giving me this time to share and talk with everyone and meet your audience this way. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and end it here. And thank you again for this time.